Well, hey, what's up, you guys? It's Valeria, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about what probably is the scariest show to exist on the internet today. And if you guys see this show on any of your streaming platforms, please do not click it and do not watch it. So this show is called Shadow, and it's been reported to appear on different streaming platforms despite the fact that it never actually aired. There has only been one recorded story of the show being watched, and trigger warning, it might make you feel uneasy at best. So there was a guy, and for the sake of the story, we're gonna call him John. One afternoon, John got home from work early, and he was in a mood to start watching a new show. When he went looking through his streaming platforms, he stumbled upon Shadow, and the cover immediately got his attention. So naturally, he started watching the show and he got completely drawn in. The show was funny, it was relatable, and had a perfect balance of suspense and romance. At many points, John felt like the show was made specifically for him, so he started telling his friends about it. He would ask his friends if they have watched the show, and if they haven't, he would recommend for them to watch the show. However, none of his friends could actually find the show on any streaming platform, which at first they just brushed off. But the more John talked about the show, the more curious they got. And a few of his friends actually tried Googling the show, but when doing so, they could not find any information about it. John continued watching the show alone, but the further into the season that he got, the weirder the events in the show would be. The characters started breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the camera, which John assumed was a quirky director's choice. But the more he listened to what the characters were actually saying, the more creepier it became, because it seemed like they weren't talking to the camera, it seemed like they were talking to John himself. The characters would casually mention the names of John's friends and even family members, which you can call a coincidence, but I don't know. I don't think so. Slowly, the situations and the conflicts in the show started resembling John's life, like the situations that he's actually lived through in the past. One time during John's watch session, he got a text, so he pulled out his phone to respond. But the second his eyes left the TV screen, all the dialogue in the show stopped. Once John was finished typing his text and he put his phone down, he briefly noticed one of the characters looking directly at him. But the second they made eye contact, the character went right back to the scene and continued the dialogue like nothing happened. And according to John, this would happen anytime he would leave the room. Any dialogue in the show would stop, despite the fact that the show was not technically paused. And the same thing happened yet another time when John got up from the couch to get a snack from the pantry. But this time, when he was in the kitchen, he heard one phrase coming from the TV. He heard one of the characters say, "He's taking longer than usual." Once he got back to the living room, the show continued like nothing happened. The closer John got to the end of the season, the more recent the events would be in relation to his life. John was getting really weirded out at this point, and since none of his friends had the show on their streaming platforms, he wanted to invite one of his friends over to watch the show with him and get a second opinion. So one weekend, John's friend came over to watch Shadow with him. For the sake of the story, let's call his friend Gary. So John and Gary got settled on the couch to watch the show. However, when John went to click play, the show just wouldn't load. And they tried reloading the website and restarting the TV, but nothing seemed to work. Anytime that John would click on the cover, the show just would not load. At the end of the night, when Gary left, John tried playing the show again, and what do you know? This time, it worked. So for whatever reason, John could only watch the show alone. And things only got weirder from here. Whenever John would move around the room, the cast members would glance at him as if they're aware of what's going on in the real world. And after everything that's happened, John was too creeped out to continue watching the show, so he stopped. He wasn't gonna finish it. However, that night, the TV turned on by itself and started playing the show. John would get up, go to the living room, and turn off the show, then go back to sleep. And the same thing would happen every night going forward. Every night at around 4 a.m., the TV would turn on by itself and start playing Shadow. John even unplugged the TV, but the show still played. John was freaked out at that point because he was on the last episode of the show, and the plot of that episode was of the main character discovering a new show that they really liked. And to add fire to the flame, the setting of that scene was identical to John's living room. John was in shock, so he pulled out his phone to record the TV screen for proof. But the second he pressed the record button, the TV turned off. The following night, John woke up at 4 a.m. once again, but this time the TV wasn't playing like it has been for the past week. So with relief, John got up to go to the kitchen and get some water. But before he was able to turn on the lights, he saw the entire cast of Shadow sitting on his couch in the living room staring directly at him. And no one has heard from John since that night. It was like he vanished from the face of the earth. The first person to notice John's disappearance was his best friend Gary. He first noticed that something was wrong when John stopped responding to his calls and texts and wouldn't show up to any of their friends' hangouts. Luckily, Gary had a spare key to John's apartment, so he went over to check on him. When Gary opened the door, the apartment was empty. All of John's things were still there, but John himself was missing. John's bed was left unmade, all the lights were off, nothing seemed too out of ordinary. But the TV screen in John's living room was broken. And the whole reason we're aware that the story happened was because Gary was able to find John's journal describing all the events in detail. When looking around John's apartment, Gary also found a CCTV camera in the corner of the living room, which was not there before. After taking the SD card and taking it home, Gary found the footage. And the footage cut off the second that John walked into the living room being greeted by strange people sitting on the couch. When they presented this evidence to the police, they just said that John must have been mentally unstable and probably ran away. Because the events in the journal made no sense, the show did not exist, and the people in the house were already there when the recording started. And Gary almost believed the police until one night he saw the show Shadow pop up on his laptop. Now, Gary was at John's place weeks ago and he did see the cover of the show, but the one on his laptop was different. There was an extra character on the cover that resembled John a bit too much. Now, instead of watching the show, Gary decided to do more research. A quick Google search got him nothing. It took him hours until he was able to find more information on Shadow on the dark web. Apparently, during the filming process, a huge accident happened, killing the entire staff and crew in the most gruesome way possible. Obviously, the production stopped and the show was canceled. The production company paid so much money to keep this information hidden to not ruin its reputation. Since the show was never actually released, no one really knows how some people are able to see it on their streaming platforms. But there are a few theories about whose TV the show will appear on next. Some people say that the show targets people working in the film industry to get revenge. Other people believe that you must know the previous victim of the show for it to appear on your platform. But the general consensus is that all you need to do to see the show on your platform is to just know its name.